Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to a place that's less of a cozy historical retreat and more of a full-on, hardcore survival camp. Ancient Sparta. We're going to explore what life, love, and family were really like in this famously severe society, and how for them, even the most intimate parts of life were a matter of state policy. A word of warning. You might not even make it through this first chapter. No pressure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little community is spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel isn't war. It's not the soft embrace of a mother, not a gentle swaddling cloth. It's a current of cool air on your new skin, sharp and unfamiliar. Your world, for the few days you've been in it, has been a muted blur of sensation. But this feeling is distinct. It's the feeling of being moved. Your eyes, still milky and unfocused, struggle to make sense of shapes and shadows. You are being carried, and the arms that hold you are not your mother's. They are firm, calloused, and purposeful. They belong to your father. You can't see his face, but you can feel the tension in his grip. This isn't a proud father showing off his newborn. This is an official duty. He carries you out of the small, sparse home into the sharp Laconian sunlight. The world outside is a symphony of overwhelming sensations. The distant clang of metal on metal from a training ground. The murmur of disciplined voices. The dry smell of dust and herbs. You are a small, fragile bundle in a world built of iron will. Your destination is a public place, a sort of colonnade hall called a lesche. Here, sitting in a solemn row, are the elders of your tribe. These are the men of the Jeris Aye, the Council of Elders. Their faces are maps of past campaigns, etched with scars and the deep lines of authority. They are old, yes, but they carry the unyielding hardness that defines this land. They are not here to coo over you or to celebrate your arrival. They are here to judge you. Your father presents you to them. He unwraps the simple cloth, exposing your tiny, vulnerable body to their collective gaze. A silence falls over the hall, broken only by your own soft, involuntary gurgles. You are an object of scrutiny. The elders leaned forward. One of them, with hands that look as ancient as the olive trees outside, gently but firmly takes you. He turns you over, running a practiced finger down your spine. He examines your limbs, your head, the way you reflexively kick your feet. They are not looking for beauty. They are looking for perfection, or more accurately, the absence of imperfection. They are assessing you like a farmer assesses livestock, or a craftsman inspects a tool. Are you well formed? Are you strong? Do you show any sign of weakness? Any hint of infirmity that might later become a burden to the state? There's a famous story, one that the writer Plutarch recorded centuries after your time, that Spartan babies were bathed in wine as a test of their constitution. The theory was that a weak or epileptic infant would convulse and falter in the undiluted wine, while a strong one would emerge tempered and firm. Historians today think this might be more of a dramatic flourish than a standard procedure, but it captures the spirit of the moment perfectly. You are being tested for your fundamental quality, and this is where historians still argue. What was the exact checklist? What constituted a fail? Was it a visibly crooked limb, a misshapen skull, or was it something more subtle? A cry that sounded more like a whimper than a nascent roar. A perceived frailty in your frame. We don't have the official Spartan rubric for baby inspection, so the precise criteria remain a subject of debate. What we know for sure is that the standard was brutally high. The state required perfect building blocks for its future army, and anything less was considered a waste of precious resources. For a long moment, you are passed from one set of weathered hands to another. Their touch is impersonal, analytical. Your father stands silently, his jaw tight, his honor, his contribution to Sparta, his entire lineage, is being weighed in the silent, clinical examination of his child, of you. Then, with a quiet grunt that could mean anything, the elder hands you back. There is a slow, collective nod from the council. You have passed. The tension in your father's arms lessens almost imperceptibly. He rewraps you in the cloth, a little more securely this time. He gives a curt, respectful nod to the elders and turns to leave. There are no words of congratulations, no smiles. The transaction is complete. You have been approved. You have been deemed worthy of the resources it will take to raise you. You have earned your right to a Spartan life. As he carries you back home, the sunlight feels a little less harsh. Had the verdict been different, had the elders shaken their heads instead of nodding, your journey would have ended here. Your father would have carried you in the opposite direction, towards the jagged, unforgiving slopes of Mount Tegetos. There, in a chasm known as the Agoge, the place of exposure, you would have been left, not thrown, necessarily, but placed, abandoned to the elements, a flawed piece of state property, returned to nature. But that is not your fate. You are now, officially, a potential asset, not a son, not yet. You are an investment, and your brutal, lifelong training is about to begin. You are back in the dim light of your family's home. The air is still, but the silence is different now. It's the silence of a past test. A hurdle cleared. Your mother takes you into her arms. Her touch is different from your father's. Softer, perhaps, but no less firm. There is relief in her posture, but not the effusive, tearful joy you might see in another culture. This is Sparta. Relief is a quiet, internal affair. As you lie there, a tiny, state-approved product, the shadow of the alternative still hangs in the air. That journey to the elders could have been your first and last. Let's talk about that mountain, Tegetos. In the landscape of your life, it is a constant, jagged presence on the horizon. It is not a place for picnics or scenic hikes. It is a symbol of the ultimate state authority. The chasm where the unworthy were said to be left was called the Agoge, which translates to something like the deposits or the place of exposure. The word itself is chillingly bureaucratic. It's a term for discarding something, not for a sacred burial. This was the core of Spartan eugenics. The ruthless, unsentimental belief that the strength of the collective depended entirely on the quality of its individual parts. The state, the polis, was a living organism, and it could not afford to carry weak cells. Every mouth to feed, every boy to train, was an investment. Each child born with a significant physical defect was, in their cold calculus, a bad investment. Now, here's where the popular image gets a little more complex. For centuries, people pictured a gorge literally filled with the bones of rejected infants, a grim testament to Spartan cruelty. The writer Plutarch, who is our main source for this, certainly painted a vivid picture. But modern archaeology tells a slightly different story. When archaeologists excavated the chasms on Mount Tegetos, they found human remains. Yes, but the skeletons were predominantly those of adults and adolescents, not infants. This has led to a new theory, that the Agoge was more of a general dumping ground for the state's refuse. Criminals, traitors, prisoners of war. So what happened to the babies? The practice was likely exposure, not throwing. A baby deemed unfit would be left in a designated, desolate place on the mountainside, abandoned to fate. This distinction might seem small, but it's significant. It was a passive act of letting nature take its course, rather than an active, violent one. The end result, of course, was often the same, but it opens up other possibilities. And this is where historians are still debating. How absolute was this rule? Was any sign of imperfection a death sentence? Or was it reserved for only the most severe and obvious disabilities that would genuinely prevent a boy from becoming a soldier or a girl from bearing strong children? Some scholars argue that the power and status of the family might have played a role. A child from a powerful lineage with a minor flaw might be overlooked, while a child from a lesser family could be rejected for the same issue. The state's decision was final, but perhaps influence could tip the scales. Furthermore, was abandonment always a death sentence? This is another point of intense speculation. In a society with a permanent, subjugated underclass, the helots, it's plausible that a helot family might find and secretly raise a discarded Spartan infant. For them, another pair of hands to work the fields would be a potential asset, not a military liability. There's no concrete proof of this. Of course, no Spartan documents boast of this humane loophole, but it's a compelling thought that human compassion might have found a way to subvert even the most rigid state decree. It's a flicker of hope in a system that seems designed to extinguish it. For you, though, these are just whispers, stories told to instill the fundamental lesson of your existence. You are here because you were deemed worthy. The mountain is a reminder of the fate you escape. As you grow, you will see it every day. When you stumble during your first attempts to walk, when you cry too loudly, when you fail a task, the shadow of Taget OS is a silent rebuke. It represents the standard you must always meet. It is the ultimate quality control check, and you are expected to live a life that continually validates the elder's initial decision. You are not a reject. You are a project, and the state is your project manager, your CEO, and your sole shareholder. Your life is a loan from Sparta, and you will be expected to pay it back with interest, in sweat, discipline, and, if necessary, blood. The screening at your birth was just the beginning. The state's ownership of your body has only just been formalized. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. Your world is a small one, confined to the simple, functional rooms at your home. But even here, in the supposed sanctuary of family, the Spartan system is at work, shaping you through the hands of the first and most important state-appointed trainer you will ever have, your mother. If you were expecting warm lullabies and gentle rocking, you are in the wrong city-state. Your mother's love is not expressed in coddling. It's expressed in forging. Spartan women were famous throughout the Greek world for their tough, almost detached approach to child rearing. Plutarch noted that Spartan nurses were highly sought after by wealthy families in other cities because they raised children who were not fussy, not picky with their food, not afraid of the dark, not given to crying or whining. That training starts with you. Now, when you cry, you are not immediately picked up. Your mother first assesses the cry. Is it a cry of genuine need, hunger, real pain? Or is it a cry for attention? A complaint? If she deems it the latter, you are left alone. You must learn to self-soothe, to endure discomfort without demanding comfort. You are taught from infancy that your emotional state is your own responsibility. The world will not rush to pacify you. This isn't cruelty for its own sake. It's the first lesson in emotional armor. A future Spartan warrior cannot be broken by fear or loneliness. Your swaddling clothes are not tight. They are loose, allowing your limbs to grow strong and unconstrained. You are often left naked to move freely, to feel the air on your skin, to become accustomed to changes in temperature. This is physical conditioning in its earliest form. Your body must learn to be resilient, to adapt. Weakness is a luxury Sparta cannot afford, and it will not be cultivated in the nursery. Your food is simple and plain. There are no special treats, no sweet morsels to quiet a tantrum. You eat what is given, and you learn not to be a picky eater. This builds a robust constitution, but it also teaches a deeper lesson, the subjugation of personal preference. You do not get what you want. You get what you need to become strong. Desire is a dangerous and destabilizing force. Discipline begins with the palate. And then there are the stories. The tales your mother tells you are not of mischievous gods or clever talking animals. They are tales of heroes, of King Leonidas and his 300 at Thermopylae, of warriors who came back from battle either with their shield or on it. The phrase, either with it or on it, is a lullaby of sorts. It is the core of your social contract. Come home victorious, carrying your shield, or come home dead, carried upon it. There is no honorable third option for retreat or surrender. She drills this into your consciousness before you can even properly speak. Honor is not an abstract concept. It is a physical object. The heavy bronze shield you will one day carry. To drop it in battle to flee was the ultimate act of cowardice, as it not only signaled your own disgrace but also broke the phalanx, endangering the man next to you. Here's a strange detail of this upbringing. Spartan mothers were said to be almost proud of a son's honorable death. There are accounts, perhaps exaggerated by other Greeks in awe and horror, of mothers who would kill a son who returned from battle as a coward. One story tells of a mother, on hearing that her son had died bravely, saying, "Then I am a happy mother." Upon hearing another son had fled, she said nothing, her silence a condemnation more potent than any scream. While the hypocricy of a mother actually killing her son is debatable, the sentiment behind it is not. A son's dishonor was a mother's dishonor. Her life's work, producing a worthy warrior for Sparta, would have been a failure. Historians still grapple with the emotional reality behind this facade. Were Spartan mothers truly this devoid of the natural maternal instinct seen elsewhere? Or was this a highly ritualized, public performance of stoicism? It's likely the truth is somewhere in the middle. They undoubtedly loved their children, but that love was filtered through an intense, all-consuming ideology. They were not just mothers. They were state functionaries whose primary role was to produce and prime the next generation of defenders. Their affection was tough because it had to be. Coddling a child, in their view, was a form of maternal malpractice. It would be like sending a soldier into battle with a cardboard shield. So, you learn your first lessons in stoicism from your mother. You learn that comfort is earned, not given. You learn that fear is to be mastered, not catered to. You learn that your value is tied directly to your utility and your honor. She is your first drill sergeant, instilling the core software of a Spartan mind before you can even form complete sentences. It is a harsh, demanding love, A love that prepares you for a life where the collective good will always outweigh your personal feelings. And this is just the gentle part. At age 7, her role as your primary educator will end abruptly, and you will be handed over to the state for the real training to begin, while you are being conditioned to endure and suppress. Life for your sister is unfolding in a way that would shock almost anyone else in the ancient Greek world. If you were in Athens, your sister would be a ghost. She'd be kept indoors, taught only domestic skills like weaving, and prepared for a life of silent obedience in her husband's home. She would be neither seen nor, ideally, heard in public. But this is not Athens. Here, your sister is not a ghost. She is a physical presence. You see her in the courtyard, her body lean and muscular, while you are learning to suppress your cries. She is learning to run, to wrestle, to throw a javelin and a discus. This is not a hobby. This is her state-mandated education. Spartan girls, just like boys, were expected to be physically fit. The logic, as always, was ruthlessly practical. A strong, healthy woman would produce strong, healthy babies, preferably boys, future soldiers for the state. Xenophon, an Athenian historian who admired many aspects of Sparta, wrote that the Spartan lawgiver, Lycurgus, believed that the job of childbearing was so important that the mother's body needed to be as prepared as the father's. So, you watch her. She exercises with other girls. Her movements powerful and confident. They run races, their bare legs flashing in the sun. They compete in wrestling matches, grappling in the dust with a seriousness that mirrors the boys' training. They practice throwing the discus and javelin, their arms developing the sinewy strength needed to hurl them impressive distances. These aren't just games. They are public, state-sponsored athletic competitions. Festivals would feature girls' athletic events right alongside the boys. This was a spectacle that both bewildered and scandalized visitors from other Greek city-states, who were used to their women being cloistered uncovered. And that brings us to the most shocking part for outsiders. They often did this naked, or very nearly so. The peplos, the traditional dress for Spartan women, was notoriously short and had a high slit up the side, earning them the nickname phenome rides, or thigh showers, from other Greeks. During athletic training on competitions, they would oft unexercise completely nude, just as the boys did. For the Spartans, this had nothing to do with seduction and everything to do with practicality and a complete lack of bodily shame. Nudity in an athletic context was simply normal. The body was a tool, a piece of equipment for the state, and its form and function were to be honed and displayed with pride, regardless of gender. Here we encounter a curious detail that reveals much about their mindset. While Spartan girls were receiving this robust physical education, they were also learning to read and write. This was another anomaly. In most of ancient Greece, literacy was a skill reserved for men of a certain class. But in Sparta, a functional level of literacy was considered necessary for women. Why? Because while the men were off at the barracks or at war, which was most of their lives, the women were in charge. They managed the households, the finances, and the all-important kill arrows, the plot of land assigned to each Spartan citizen, along with the helot slaves who worked it. A woman needed to be literate to manage accounts and run the estate effectively. This gave Spartan women a degree of economic power and autonomy that was unparalleled in the Greek world. They could, and did, inherit and own property in their own right. But historians are still debating the true nature and extent of this freedom. Was it genuine female empowerment as we might understand it today? Or was it just a different, more practical form of enslavement to the state's ideology. The argument for the latter is strong. A woman's education, her physical prowess, her economic power, it was all channeled toward a single, state-approved goal: producing warrior sons. She was free from the domestic seclusion of an Athenian wife, but she was free for the purpose of being a better baby-making machine for the Spartan military. Her body was not her own. It was a public trust. Her personal desires, her romantic aspirations, were secondary to her reproductive duty. You see this in the way she carries herself. There's an absence of vanity, but an abundance of pride. She is not taught to be demure or alluring. She is taught to be bold, competent, and sharp-tongued. Spartan women were famous for their wit. Lakonikos means terse or pithy, the root of our word laconic. There's a famous story of a foreign woman saying to Gorgo, King Leonidas' wife, "You Spartan women are the only ones who can rule men." Gorgo's legendary reply was, "That is because we are the only ones who give birth to men." That single sentence perfectly encapsulates her identity. Her power is derived from her role as the mother of warriors. So as you take your first stumbling steps, your sister is already running. She is being built into the other, equally essential pillar of the Spartan state. You are being forged into a shield. She is being forged into the mother of shield bearers. You are two sides of the same coin, minted by the state, for the state, and soon, your paths will diverge dramatically. Her training will continue at home, preparing her for marriage and motherhood. Yours is about to take you away from home, forever. The day you turn 7 is the most significant day of your life so far. It is a day of severance. There is no party, no gifts, no celebration of your birth. Instead, it is a formal, irreversible transition. It is the day you leave home. You are no longer your parents' son. You are now, fully and legally, a ward of the state. Your mother, who has been your entire world, hands you over with the same stoic resolve she has shown all your life. There may be a flicker of something in her eyes, a shadow of the emotion another mother might show, but it is quickly extinguished by duty. She has done her part. Now the state takes over. You are brought to a place that will be your home, your school, and your entire world for the next 13 years. This is the Agoge. The word itself means the rearing or the leading, but it's more accurately translated as a system of rigorous, state-sponsored education and military training. It is less a school and more a crucible, designed to systematically strip you of your individuality and forge you into a single, interchangeable component of the Spartan phalanx. Your personal identity, your quirks, your private fears and desires, all of these are about to be burned away. You are herded together with all the other 7-year-old boys from your tribe. You look around at the other faces, a sea of confusion and barely suppressed fear. Some boys are trying to look tough, puffing out their chests, mimicking the stances of the older warriors they've seen. Others are just trying not to cry. You find yourself somewhere in the middle, a knot of anxiety tightening in your stomach. The first thing they do is shave your head. Your hair, which your mother had kept neatly trimmed, is unceremoniously shorn off. This is a symbolic act of stripping you of your past, of your family identity. You are all made to look the same. Then, you are given one garment. One, it's a simple, coarse tunic called a chiton, and it is expected to last you the entire year, through the blistering heat of summer and the biting cold of winter. You will have no shoes. Hither, the belief was that going barefoot toughened the feet, making you a faster and more agile runner over any terrain. You are organized into a pack. a kind of wolf pack called an Agila. This group will be your new family. You will eat, sleep, train, and fight with these boys. Your loyalty is no longer to your blood relatives. It is to the pack. At the head of your pack is an older boy, usually a young man around 19 or 20 called an Iran. He is your prefect, your drill instructor, and your absolute master. He has survived the Agoge himself and now has the authority to command you, to discipline you, and to mete out punishment, which is frequent and harsh. His word is law. The barracks are stark. You sleep on the floor on a bed you make yourself. In the summer, you gather reeds from the Eurotas River by hand, no knives allowed, and weave them into a rough mattress. In the winter, you might be allowed to add thistledown for a bit of insulation. A small, state-sanctioned luxury. The message is clear. Comfort makes you soft. Hardship makes you strong. This is a world of constant, grinding competition. Everything is a contest. Who can run the fastest? Who can endure the most pain without crying out? Who is the cleverest? You are pitted against your pack mates relentlessly. Fights are encouraged by the IRNS as a way to establish a pecking order and weed out the weak. But they must be fought with honor. Fist to fist. To be caught using a trick or fighting dirty would earn you a punishment worse than any beating from a rival. Historians still debate the psychological impact of this system. Did it successfully create unwavering loyalty and brotherhood? Or did it breed a generation of bullies and emotionally stunted adults? The Spartans would have argued for the former, by forcing you to rely only on each other. The Agoge aimed to create a bond stronger than family, the bond of the shield wall, where the man next to you is literally your lifeline. Every aspect of your life is designed to subordinate your personal needs to the needs of the group. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of the Agoge is the institutionalized relationship between the young boys and the older warriors. But we'll get to that later. For now, what you notice is the constant gaze of older men, elite warriors. Men in their 20s and 30s often visit the Agoge grounds to watch the boys train. They are scouting for talent, for boys who show exceptional promise, courage, or resilience. To be noticed by one of these men is a great honor and a source of intense competition among you and your peers. As your first day in the Agoge draws to a close, you huddle with your pack on the hard floor. The sounds are different here. No mother's hum, no familiar household noises, just the breathing of other boys, the distant shouts of an Iran, the cold, unforgiving silence of the barracks. You are hungry, you are cold, and you are utterly alone. Even in this crowd, the system has taken you. It will break you down, and if you are strong enough, it will rebuild you in its own image. Your childhood ended this morning. Your long, brutal apprenticeship as a Spartan has just begun. The sun rises on your second day in the Agoge, and with it comes a gnawing sensation in your stomach. Hunger. It will become your constant companion. The food provided to you is intentionally, systematically inadequate. You are given a single daily ration of a foul-tasting black broth, a notoriously unappetizing Spartan staple. It was a pork-based stew, cooked with salt, vinegar, and pig's blood. A visitor from Sparta, a city famous for its luxury, once tasted it and famously remarked that he now understood why Spartans were so willing to die in battle. You also get a small piece of bread and maybe a fig or two. It is just enough to keep you from starving, but never enough to make you feel full. This is not due to a lack of resources. Sparta, with its vast tracts of fertile land worked by helot slaves, had plenty of food. This institutionalized hunger is a training tool. It is designed to teach you discipline, to make you accustomed to scarcity, and to sharpen your senses. But it has another, more immediate purpose. It forces you to steal. Stealing food is not only permitted, it is expected. It is a core part of your curriculum. The irony is, your young instructors will tell you that it is a disgrace to be hungry, but a far greater disgrace to be caught stealing. This turns survival into a game, a practical exam in stealth, cunning, and resourcefulness. You and your pack mates must learn to move like ghosts, to raid the kitchens, the fields, and even the private homes of citizens. You must learn to assess risk, to create diversions, to work as a team. This is not petty theft. It is tactical training for future soldiers who will need to live off the land and conduct trades in enemy territory. The consequences for getting caught are severe. If a farmer or another citizen catches you, you are not just scolded. You are brought before your Iren and flogged, mercilessly. The punishment, however, is not for the act of stealing itself. It is for your incompetence. You are being punished for your clumsiness, for your lack of skill in the art of subterfuge. It's a brutal, but effective lesson. You learn very quickly to be better at it. You learn to read the patterns of the guards, to know which floorboards creak, to snatch a loaf of bread or a wheel of cheese and disappear into the night. This practice gave rise to one of the most famous, and frankly disturbing, stories of Spartan fortitude. It's the tale of a boy who had successfully stolen a live fox, hiding it under his tunic. As he was walking back, he encountered one of the adult citizens who began to chat with him. To reveal the fox would be to admit his failure. So, as the man spoke to him, the boy stood there, unflinching, while the terrified fox, trapped beneath his clothes, clawed and bit at his stomach, literally disembowelling him. The boy never cried out, never flinched, and kept up the conversation until the man left. He then collapsed and died, having chosen a gruesome death over the shame of being caught. Whether this story is literally true is, of course, a matter of historical debate. It certainly sounds like the kind of propaganda Sparta would love, but it perfectly illustrates the ideal you are being molded to fit. Absolute control over pain and fear, and the elevation of honor above life itself. This is what the hunger, the beatings, and the constant competition are all aiming for. There's another, more subtle layer to this Hunger Games scenario. It's a lesson in social hierarchy. The helots, the state-owned slaves who work the land, are your primary targets. Stealing from them is practically encouraged. This reinforces the deep-seated belief that the helots are subhuman, that their property and their lives are forfeit to the needs of a Spartan citizen. It is an early and brutal lesson in the dehumanization required to maintain a slave state. You learn that your survival is more important than their livelihood. This is a critical psychological component of the system that underpins all of Spartan society. Without the helots doing all the labor, you wouldn't have the time to train. This institutionalized theft from them is a constant reminder of who is at the top of the pyramid. Historians argue about the long-term effects of this. Did it create resourceful, self-reliant soldiers, or did it create a society of entitled thugs who saw the world as their personal larder? The answer is probably both. On the battlefield, a Spartan soldier was famously disciplined within the phalanx, but outside of that rigid structure, on campaign, they were known for being effective and ruthless foragers. This part of your Agoge education is designed to build the latter skill set, so your days become a cycle of grueling physical drills and strategic, desperate quests for food. You learn the weight of hunger, the sharp thrill of a successful theft, and the stinging pain of failure. You learn to read the faces of your packmates, to know who to trust on a raid and who is likely to get you caught. You are becoming leaner, harder, and more cunning. You are becoming a predator, and all the while, you feel the eyes of the older warriors on you, watching, judging, waiting to see who will rise to the top of the food chain. As you grow older, moving from a boy of 7 or 8 to a youth of 12 or 13, your world within the Agoge becomes more complex. The simple dynamics of pack survival begin to be overlaid with a new, more personal set of relationships. You start to notice the attention of the older men in a different way. It's no longer just the general scrutiny of instructors and officials. It is a focused, individual interest. A specific man, a young warrior in his 20s, a full citizen and a member of the hip piece, the Royal Honor Guard, perhaps, starts to appear more frequently at your training sessions. He doesn't watch the whole group. He watches you. When you succeed in a wrestling match, you might catch his eye and receive a subtle, approving nod. When you take a particularly harsh beating without crying out, his gaze lingers on you with an expression of respect. He is what the Spartans called an aristes, which translates to lover. You, the boy he has singled out, are his aides, or beloved. This is the beginning of one of the most controversial and misunderstood aspects of Spartan society: institutionalized pederasty. This was not a hidden or taboo practice. It was a formal, socially acknowledged, and deeply integrated part of the Agoge in the Spartan military system. For a respected warrior to take a boy under his wing in this way was considered a noble and essential part of the boy's education. His courtship, if you can call it that, is not one of sweet words or gentle gifts. He will test you. He might single you out for a particularly harsh criticism, pushing you to see if you will break. He might arrange for you to be ambushed by his friends, to see how you fight when outnumbered. He is looking for aid, for excellence, for that spark of indomitable will that defines a true Spartan. Your response to these challenges is your way of communicating back to him. If you show courage, resilience, and honor, you are showing yourself worthy of his mentorship and his affection. If he decides you are worthy, he formally takes you on as his protege. This relationship is now public knowledge. His reputation becomes tied to yours. If you act with courage and distinction, it brings him honor. If you behave like a coward, you bring shame not only upon yourself but also upon him. He is now responsible for your development. He becomes your personal mentor, your advocate, and your guide through the brutal world of the Agoge. He will teach you things the formal instructors do not. The finer points of combat, the unwritten rules of Spartan politics, the stories of his own campaigns. He will also provide you with gifts, but in true Spartan fashion, these are practical, not sentimental. He might give you a better quality training spear, or arrange for extra rations to be stolen by you. The most significant gift, however, was often a fighting cock. Cockfighting was a passion in Sparta, and the birds were seen as emblems of courage and the will to fight to the death. Gifting a prize rooster to a boy was a symbolic gesture, a transfer of the warrior spirit. Historians are still in a deep and oft unheated debate about the physical nature of these relationships. Ancient sources, like Plutarch's Xenophon, are frustratingly ambiguous. Xenophon, who admired the Spartans, insisted that the lawgiver Lycurgus had designed the system to be a purely platonic mentorship, a chaste love focused on cultivating the boy's soul and character. He claimed that any physical, carnal relationship would be considered as shameful as incest. However, Other Greek writers from places like Athens, who were often critical of Sparta, painted a very different picture. They suggested that these relationships were absolutely physical and sexual. The philosopher Plato, for instance, implies that the Spartan and Cretan models of pederasty were indeed sexual. The truth is likely somewhere in the gray area between these two extremes. It's plausible that the nature of the relationship varied greatly from pair to pair. Some may have been purely mentorships, while others were deeply romantic and physical. The social ideal might have been platonic, but the human reality was likely far more complicated. There probably wasn't a single, universally applied rule, but rather a spectrum of behaviors, some more acceptable than others. For you, a boy of 13, this is a profound change. For the first time since you were 7, you have an individual advocate. You have someone who sees you not just as another faceless member of the pack, but as someone with potential. His attention is a shield against the casual brutality of the other boys. His mentorship is a ladder, offering a way to climb the treacherous social hierarchy of the Agoge. It is a relationship built on a strange mix of admiration, discipline, and affection. It is your first real experience of love, but it is a love forged in the Spartan furnace, demanding, conditional, and entirely public. Your performance, in the training yard and eventually on the battlefield, is the currency of this love, and the pressure to be worthy of it is immense. The relationship with your Aristes deepens. It becomes the central emotional anchor in your life, a complex bond of mentorship, admiration, and, yes, a form of love that is unique to your world. This is not the soft, private affection you might imagine. It is a public institution, as structured and purposeful as every other aspect of Spartan life. Its goal, like everything else, is to create better soldiers. Your mentor becomes your window into the world of adult men. He takes you with him to the SYS Citya, the common mess hall where the full citizens eat their meals. You are not yet a member, but as his protege, you are allowed to be present, to listen, to observe. Use it quietly, absorbing the laconic jokes, the blunt political discussions, and the endless analysis of military tactics. It's an education in itself. You learn the rhythm of Spartan male society. You see how men interact, how they build consensus, how they use sharp, witty insults as a form of social currency. In these mess halls, you see the dynamics of honor and shame play out in real time. A man who showed cowardice in a recent drill might be forced to sit alone, the target of pointed jokes. A man who performed an act of exceptional bravery would be lauded with gruff, understated praise, which in Sparta is the equivalent of a public triumph. You learn that a man's reputation, his time, is everything. It is a living thing that must be constantly fed with acts of courage and discipline. Your Aristes is your guide in this world. He teaches you how to conduct yourself, how to speak or, more importantly, when to remain silent, and how to understand the subtle cues of this hardened society. His investment in you is total. He is, in a very real sense, molding you into the man he wants you to become. This is where the concept of a glorious relationship comes in. The bond was seen as a way of transmitting virtue directly from one generation to the next. The older man's experience, wisdom, and courage were thought to inspire the boy, who in turn would strive to be worthy of such a great mentor, pushing himself to new heights of excellence. The emotional intensity of this bond was considered a military asset. The idea was that an army where soldiers were fighting alongside their beloved mentors and protégés would be an unbreakable force. A man would rather die 1,000 times over than show cowardice in front of his aides. A boy would perform feats of reckless bravery to impress his hostess. This created pairs of fighters on the battlefield who were bound by something deeper than mere discipline. The famous Sacred Band of Thebes, a rival city-state's elite fighting force composed of 150 male couples, is believed to have been an imitation and formalization of this Spartan principle. Now, let's address the elephant in the room again, the physical aspect. As mentioned, ancient sources are conflicting. However, the weight of evidence from non-Spartan writers and the broader context of Greek culture suggests that a physical, sexual component was often present, but it would have been governed by its own strict, unwritten rules. It would not have been seen as abuse in the modern sense. Because the power dynamic was framed as educational, the relationship was supposed to be ennobling for both parties. The older man was not just satisfying his desires. He was undertaking the solemn duty of shaping a future citizen. The boy was not a passive victim. He was an apprentice, learning about honor, loyalty, and a very specific form of adult love. This leads to a strange and fascinating point of historical debate. What happened when the boy grew up? The Spartan model of pederasty was strictly defined by age and role. The relationship was expected to end when the boy reached adulthood, around age 20. At that point, the Aites would become a full-fledged warrior and would be expected to take a wife and, eventually, become an hostess to a new generation of boys. The cycle would continue. This transition is a source of much speculation. How did these intense emotional bonds simply dissolve or transform? Did they evolve into lifelong friendships? Or were they severed completely to make way for new attachments? The system demanded it. That human emotions are rarely so neat. So you exist in this intense emotional bubble. Your loyalty to your pack is strong. Your obedience to the state is absolute. But your devotion to your hostess is personal and passionate. He is your hero, your teacher, your first love. You learn to anticipate his moods, to understand his quiet signals. You fight harder in his presence. You stand straighter. You are not just fighting for Sparta anymore. You are fighting for his approval, for his pride. It is a powerful, intoxicating motivation, a force that shapes your character as much as any whip or rationed meal. And it is preparing you for the ultimate test of that loyalty, the battlefield. The bond you share with your hostess is not a gentle, private affair. It is forged, tested, and ultimately proven in the crucible of violence, both simulated and real. The love and loyalty you feel are not meant to be whispered in quiet moments. They are meant to be demonstrated through action. The entire purpose of this state-sanctioned relationship is to weaponize emotion, to turn personal affection into a tactical advantage. You see it every day in the training yard. The fights are harder now, the stakes higher. When your pack spars with another, your mentor is watching. His presence is a fire in your veins. You push yourself past the point of exhaustion, your muscles screaming, because the thought of disappointing him is more painful than any physical blow. If you are knocked down, you get up faster. If you are bleeding, you ignore it. You fight with a ferocity that is born not just of a desire to win, but a desperate need to be seen as worthy. And it works both ways. If another boy tries to bully you or treat you unfairly, your hostess will often intervene, not by shielding you, but by ensuring the fight is honorable. He might punish the other boy for fighting dirty, reinforcing the Spartan code. His honor is invested in you, so any slight against you is a slight against him. This creates a powerful protective dynamic, but one that always pushes you toward, not away from, conflict. The ultimate expression of this bond, the one the whole system is designed for, is the phalanx, the Spartan shield wall. From a young age, you are taught to drill in formation. You learn to move as one body, a single bristling creature of shields and spears. Your heavy bronze shield, the asp is not just for your own protection. Its large, concave shape is designed so that its left half protects your body, while its right half covers the exposed left side of the man standing next to you. Your life depends on him, and his life depends on you. To drop your shield is to create a gap, to endanger everyone. Now, imagine going into battle. The noise is deafening. The chanting, the war cries, the terrifying sound of thousands of men marching in unison. The fear is a cold, hard knot in your gut. But then you look to your side, and there, in the Y, is your Aristus. He is a seasoned warrior, his face calm and hard as stone. He catches your eye and gives you that same quiet, approving nod he gave you in the training yard. In that moment, your fear recedes, replaced by a powerful surge of loyalty and determination. You will not fail him. You will not be the one to break the line. This is the strategic genius of the Spartan system. By placing lovers, in the Spartan sense of the word, side by side in the line of battle, they created an emotional reinforcement that went beyond mere discipline. A man would fight with superhuman tenacity to protect his beloved. He would hold the line not just for Sparta, but for the person whose respect he valued more than life itself. The ancient Greek historian Aelian tells a story of a Spartan who was captured and about to be killed. His captors asked if he had any last words. He supposedly shouted to a nearby friend, "Tell the folks back in Sparta I died fighting as the laws command." But the subtext is clear. He is also sending a message to his Aristus, assuring him that he did not die a coward. Here we come to a cold, hard fact of Spartan military life, the attitude toward death. You have been taught since birth that to die in battle for Sparta is the most glorious fate a man can achieve. Only two groups of people were deemed worthy of having their names inscribed on a tombstone: men who died in battle, and women who died in childbirth. Both were seen as giving their lives in service to the state. This ideology is drilled into you, but it's the personal bond with your mentor that makes it real. The abstract concept of dying for Sparta becomes the concrete reality of not failing the man beside you. However, historians still debate how universally effective this was. Did it always create heroes? Or did the intensity of these bonds sometimes lead to jealousy and destructive rivalries? What happened if two men were rivals for the affection of the same boy? The system was designed to channel these powerful emotions into productive, military outcomes. But human nature is messy. The same love that could inspire incredible bravery could surely also inspire possessiveness and conflict. There are hints in the ancient texts of rules and customs designed to manage these very issues, which suggests they were a real problem. For instance, it was considered bad form for an Aristus to praise his aides too much in public, as it could breed arrogance in the boy and resentment in others. For now, though, all you know is this: the man who taught you how to be a man is now the man you will fight and die beside. The abstract lessons of the Agoge are about to become terrifyingly real. The love, the loyalty, the entire emotional landscape of your youth. It all funnels down to this single point: holding the line, protecting the man next to you, being worthy of the love that has been invested in you. The world of the Agoge is not harmonious brotherhood. It is a cauldron of ambition. And where there is ambition, there is jealousy, the system of pederasty, designed to foster loyalty, is also a primary source of rivalry and conflict. You are not the only boy seeking the mentorship of a powerful warrior, and your Aristes is not the only man looking for a promising protege. The competition is fierce. Boys would actively vie for the attention of the most respected and influential warriors. It was a matter of immense pride to be chosen by a hero of a recent campaign or a member of a prestigious family. You would push yourself harder in training, take greater risks, all in the hope of being noticed. A subtle glance, a word of praise from such a man could elevate your status among your peers instantly. Conversely, to be ignored or dismissed was a source of public shame. This created a constant, simmering tension. If you were chosen by a desirable Aristes, you would become the target of envy from the boys he overlooked. They might challenge you to fights more often, or try to sabotage you during drills, all to prove that you were unworthy of the honor you had received. You had to constantly defend not just your physical self, but your reputation. But the jealousy wasn't confined to the boys. It was a serious issue among the men as well. If two men desired the same boy, it could lead to a bitter rivalry. This wasn't treated as a private, romantic squabble. It was a public matter of honor. According to the ancient writer Aelian, if two men were in love with the same boy, they wouldn't become enemies. Instead, they were expected to form a friendship and work together to make the boy as perfect as possible. It sounds like a wonderfully civilized solution, a testament to Spartan discipline over personal feeling. However, the reality was likely far messier. This is one of those areas where historians suspect the official sources are presenting an idealized version of events. The law might have said they should become friends, but the competitive nature of Spartan masculinity makes it hard to believe this always happened. It's more likely that such rivalries were a constant source of friction within the warrior class. The state's solution was to create a strict code of conduct to manage these passions. For example, there were unwritten rules about how these relationships should be conducted. An Aristes was not supposed to be overly possessive. The boy was still a ward of the state first and foremost, and his primary duty was to his training. The mentor's role was to enhance that training, not to distract from it. Any man who was seen to be isolating his aites or focusing on frivolous, non-military aspects of the relationship would lose face. And here we find a truly bizarre and debated custom that seems designed to regulate these relationships. The concept of boys sharing in the acceptable limits of physical affection. According to some sources, it was considered shameful for a man to be obsessed with a boy's physical beauty alone. The attraction had to be to his character, his rite. To demonstrate this, there was a strange sort of honor code. Xenophon claims that if a man was motivated by lust rather than a desire to cultivate the boy's virtue, Lycurgus, the lawgiver, deemed it an abomination. Furthermore, there was a peculiar form of kidnapping that was part of the courtship. A man wouldn't simply ask a boy to be his protege. He would stage a ritual abduction, often with the help of his friends, who would capture the boy. The boy's own friends and relatives were expected to put up a token resistance. If the kidnapper was a man of good standing and reputation, the resistance would be mild, and they would eventually let him take the boy. If he was deemed unworthy, the resistance would be genuine and fierce, and he would be driven off. This ritualized the selection process, making it a community-vetted affair rather than a purely personal choice. It was a way for the society to give its stamp of approval on the match. Historians are still untangling the exact meaning of these rituals. Were they just symbolic theater, or did they reflect a genuine tension in the system? The consensus is leaning toward the latter. These elaborate rules, the mandated friendship between rivals, the ritual kidnapping, the public shame for inappropriate affection, All suggest that the Spartans were actively trying to manage a set of very powerful and potentially disruptive emotions. They recognized the power of love and jealousy, and instead of trying to suppress them entirely, they created a rigid framework of honor and shame to channel them toward the state's goals. So you learn to navigate this complex web of relationships. You feel the pride of being chosen, the sting of others' envy, and the constant pressure to live up to your mentor's expectations. You learn the subtle art of Spartan social politics, where a misplaced word or a moment of weakness can have major social consequences. It is yet another layer of your education, teaching you that even the most personal feelings are public property, to be regulated and judged by the collective. The years in the Agoge grind on. You are no longer a boy, but a teenager. Your body hardened by endless training. Your mind sharpened by constant competition and the harsh lessons of survival. As you approach the cusp of manhood, you must face one of the most infamous and brutal rituals of your entire education. The trial at the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea. Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, and, paradoxically, childbirth. In Sparta, she had a particularly stern and ancient aspect. Embodied by the cult of Artemis or Thea, the sanctuary was not a grand marble temple like the Parthenon in Athens. It was a more primitive, elemental place, and once a year, it became the stage for a bloody rite of passage. The event was a form of religious contest, a test of endurance that bordered on human sacrifice. It was known as the Agoge, which literally means the severe whipping. The premise was simple. Cheeses were stacked upon the altar of the goddess. Your goal, as a youth of the Agoge, was to run up and snatch as many cheeses as you could from the altar. The catch: the altar was surrounded by adult men, the IRNS and other officials, armed with heavy whips, as you and the other boys make a mad dash for the altar. The whips rain down. They are not ceremonial taps. They are brutal, stinging lashes designed to inflict maximum pain. The whips whistle through the air, cracking against bare backs and legs. The goal is not just to get the cheese. The goal is to endure the flogging without flinching, without crying out. It is the ultimate public demonstration of the fortitude that has been beaten into you for over a decade. The crowd, including your family and your Aristas, is watching. Your performance here is a public testament to your manhood. To cry out in pain is to bring shame upon yourself and everyone associated with you. To endure in stoic silence, even as your back is flayed open, is the highest honor. The ancient writer Lucian described it as a terrible spectacle, where priests stood by to catch the blood and sprinkle it on the altar. According to some accounts, boys would sometimes die during this ritual, choosing death over the dishonor of showing pain. This is where the story gets even stranger. This bizarre ritual of cheese and whips actually became a tourist attraction in later centuries. During the Roman period, the Romans, who had a taste for blood sports, were fascinated by the Spartans' reputation for austerity and endurance. They built a stone amphitheater around the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea specifically so that spectators could get a better view of the annual flogging of the youths. What began as an internal, sacred rite of passage was eventualized into a public blood sport for paying customers. Historians are still debating the origin and meaning of this ritual. What on earth does stealing cheese have to do with religious devotion or military training? One theory is that it's a symbolic reenactment of the theft you practiced as a child in the Agoge. It's a final, public examination of the skills of stealth and endurance, but with the punishment for failure, or rather, the reward for success, being the honorable endurance of pain. Another theory suggests it's a much older, pre-Spartan ritual, perhaps a substitute for actual human sacrifice that was once offered to an ancient, bloodthirsty goddess. By offering up their pain and their blood, the youths were appeasing the goddess and ensuring her favor for the city-state. The debate also rages over how lethal it truly was. Did boys really die every year? Cicero, the Roman order, claims he saw youths endure the whipping until they were deprived of life, and that none of them cried out. It's possible these Roman-era accounts are exaggerated for dramatic effect, to play up the barbaric nature of the authentic Greek custom. It's hard to imagine a state that was so obsessed with conserving its limited population of citizens would regularly sacrifice its best and brightest youths on an altar for cheese. It's more likely that death was a rare and tragic outcome, not a common expectation. For you, standing there, your muscles tense, waiting for the signal to begin, the historical debate is irrelevant. All you know is that this is your final exam. The pain will be immense, but the shame of failure would be infinitely worse. You take a deep breath, focusing on the image of your mentor's face in the crowd. You focus on the laconic praise you might earn if you succeed. You focus on the fundamental lesson of your entire life. Pain is temporary, but honor is eternal. The signal is given. You sprint toward the altar, the air filled with the shouts of the crowd and the sharp, terrifying whistle of the whips. This is the culmination of your Spartan education. You must prove you are no longer a boy. You must prove you are ready to bleed for Sparta. You survive the ordeal at the altar of Artemis or Thea. Your back is a latticework of healing wounds, each scar a testament to your endurance, a badge of honor you will carry for the rest of your life. You are now entering the final stage of your formal education, moving closer to full citizenship. And as you do, you find yourself in a social environment that continues to baffle outsiders. The shared spaces where men and women, boys and girls, interact with a surprising degree of casualness. The gymnasium, the public space for exercise, is the prime example. In Athens, the gymnasium was a strictly male domain, a place for men to train, socialize, and philosophize. An Athenian woman of good standing would never be seen there. But here in Sparta, the gymnasium is a co-ed facility. While you and the other young men are practicing wrestling, running, or throwing the discus, you will see your sister and her friends doing the exact same things in a nearby space. Imagine the scene. The Laconian sun beats down on a dusty field. On one side, you and your peers, your bodies lean and scarred, are grappling, the slap of skin on skin echoing in the dry air. On the other side, a group of girls, their famous thighs showing peplos dresses offering little concealment, are in the middle of a running race. Or perhaps they are practicing the javelin, their movements economical and powerful. And as we've mentioned, both groups are often exercising completely in the nude. For you, this is entirely normal. You have grown up seeing the female body not as a source of mystery and temptation, but as a fellow instrument of the state. You see their strength, their athleticism, and you are taught to respect it. This casual nudity and shared physical space was designed to foster a sense of camaraderie and to strip away any sense of shame or prurines associated with the human body. The body was for function, not for ornament. This practice, of course, was a source of endless gossip and scandal in the rest of Greece. The Athenians, in particular, were horrified. They saw it as a sign of moral degeneracy. The playwright Euripides, in his play Andromache, has a character condemn Spartan women, saying, "No Spartan girl could be chaste even if she wanted to be." They abandoned their houses to run around with young men. with naked thighs and loosened robes. This was a common stereotype, that Spartan women were licentious and undisciplined. But the Spartans saw it differently. Their lawgiver, Lycurgus, according to Plutarch, believed that this public, shared training had a specific purpose beyond just physical fitness. Firstly, it made the women take thought for their bodies, making them fit mothers. Secondly, it fostered a healthy spirit of competition and ambition in both sexes. And thirdly, and this is the most interesting part, it was meant to remove the softness and effeminacy from love and marriage, by having men and women see each other in their raw, unadorned, athletic forms, stripped of all artifice. The Spartans believed it would lead to healthier partnerships. The attraction would be based on genuine physical vitality and strength, not on manufactured beauty or hidden allure. It was, in its own way, a eugenics program that started with visual assessment. A man would see the athletic prowess of a woman and think, she will bear strong children. A woman would see the strength of a man and think, he will produce a worthy heir. It was a marketplace of genetic fitness, conducted out in the open. Here we find a strange little detail, the use of humor. The girls were not just silent participants. They were encouraged to be witty and sharp-tongued. At festivals and public events, the young women would stand and sing choral songs in which they would praise the brave young men and mercilessly mock the cowards. To be the subject of a girl's public ridicule for failing in a drill or showing fear was a powerful and humiliating form of social control. This verbal sparring was another part of the public co-ed education, teaching both sexes to be tough, resilient, and thick-skinned. But historians are still in a debate about the true social dynamics at play. Was this environment truly as asexual and functional as the official Spartan ideology claimed? Or did this constant, casual proximity lead to clandestine romances and attractions that fell outside the state-approved system? It's hard to imagine a world of fit, healthy, naked teenagers where attraction didn't bloom in unauthorized ways. The official system was designed for late marriage, but hormones don't necessarily follow state directives. The lack of records on this subject is frustrating. Spartan society was notoriously secretive and left few personal accounts. We have the official rules, but the unofficial reality remains a matter of speculation. It's likely that beneath the veneer of stern discipline, there was a whole world of flirtation and romance that history simply did not record. As you finish your training for the day, you see your sister confidently hurling a javelin. There is no sense of impropriety, no shame. There is only a shared understanding of purpose. You are both being prepared for your roles. You, for the shield wall. She, for the birthing bed. And soon, the state will decide that you are both physically primed, ready to fulfill those roles. Your days of training are nearing their end. The responsibilities of marriage and procreation are just around the corner. As you are completing the final, grueling years of the Agoge, your sister is approaching the age of marriage, and just like everything else in Sparta, her path to matrimony is unlike anything found in the rest of Greece. While an Athenian father would be busy negotiating a dowry and choosing a husband for his 14-year-old daughter, your sister has a degree of agency that is truly shocking by ancient standards. Spartan women typically married much later than other Greek women, while an Athenian girl was often married off just after puberty, around age 14 or 15. Your sister will likely be in her late teens or even early 20s when she marries. The Spartans believed that marrying at the peak of physical maturity, for both men and women, would lead to healthier, stronger children. This delay in marriage gave your sister more time to develop, both physically and mentally. and she is not a passive pawn in this process. While her father and brothers might have some say, and the state's interest is always paramount, she has a voice. The public nature of your society, the co-ed training, means she knows the young men of her generation. She has seen them compete. She has heard the songs of praise and ridicule sung about them. She has a very good idea of who is brave, who is strong, and who is a coward. A Spartan woman would not want to marry a man who had shown cowardice. His shame would become her shame, and the shame of her children. So, while she may not have absolute freedom to choose anyone she pleases, her opinion matters. The process is more of a mutual assessment. The young man, having finished his Agoge training and been admitted to a SYS city at the military mess hall, would begin to look for a wife. He would look for the same qualities your sister is looking for: strength, health, and a good reputation. It was a match based on perceived genetic and social fitness. This leads to one of the most interesting aspects of Spartan female power: their control over property. Unlike in Athens, where a woman was essentially the property of her father and then her husband, Spartan women could inherit and own land in their own right. This was a direct result of the Spartan system, with the men constantly occupied by military duties from age 7 until 60. Someone had to manage the economic engine of the state, the land kale heirs and the helots who worked it. That someone was the woman. Your sister will not just be a wife. She will be an estate manager. She needs to be intelligent, literate, and competent to run the household and its finances. This economic power gave her a level of independence and influence within the marriage that was unimaginable elsewhere. At its peak, it's estimated that women came to own as much as 2/5 of all the land in Sparta. The philosopher Aristotle, the sharp critic of Sparta, actually blamed the downfall of the state on this very fact, claiming that the license of the women and their control over wealth had led to decadence and a decline in military focus. He called it a gynecoidracia, or rule by women. Of course, Aristotle's view is highly biased and likely exaggerated, but the core point is valid. Spartan women wielded significant economic power. A wealthy heiress, a woman who stood to inherit a large estate, would be a very desirable bride, not just for her strong thighs, but for her property portfolio. This added another layer to the complex matchmaking process. Now, here's a fascinating and somewhat quirky detail of Spartan life that highlights the women's unique status. They were known for their sharp, laconic wit, and they were not afraid to use it on men. There are numerous anecdotes of their pithy and often biting remarks. One story tells of a young man who was boasting to a Spartan woman about the height of the walls in his home city. She dryly replied, "Are they high enough that women can't scale them?" The implication is clear. Strong walls are a sign of cowardly men who need to hide, and Spartan women are as capable as any. This confidence and assertiveness were cultivated as part of their education. They were not taught to be demure, but historians are still in a tug-of-war over how to interpret this freedom. Was it true empowerment? Or was it, as some scholars argue, simply a more efficient form of state control? The argument goes that every aspect of a woman's freedom, her education, her athleticism, her economic power, was ultimately harnessed for one purpose: to serve the state by producing soldiers. She was free from the loom, but shackled to the womb. Her body and her property were ultimately resources for the Spartan war machine. Her personal happiness or romantic fulfillment were, at best, a secondary concern. The state didn't care if she was in love. It cared if she could produce a future hoplite. As your sister considers her options, she is weighing a complex set of factors. A man's bravery, his physical fitness, his family's reputation, and perhaps his property. It is a pragmatic, clear-eyed assessment, and the man who is interested in her is doing the same. It is a courtship of two highly trained state assets, preparing to merge their resources for the good of the polis. The wedding, when it happens, will be just as strange and pragmatic as the courtship. The time has come. A match has been made for your sister. The chosen man is a strong warrior, a full citizen who has proven his worth. The families have agreed that there will be no public ceremony with a joyful feast and a procession through the streets. A Spartan wedding is a secret, clandestine affair, resembling a covert operation more than a celebration. It begins with a ritual that looks, to any outsider, like a violent kidnapping. On the appointed night, the groom does not arrive at the family's door with gifts. Instead, he abducts his bride. This is not a brutal, non-consensual act, but a highly ritualized piece of theater. He and his friends will raid her family's home and carry her off. The bride is expected to put up a show of resistance, and her female relatives will protect her. But it's all part of the performance. This ritual reinforced several Spartan ideals: the man's strength and assertiveness, and the idea that marriage was a capture, not a gentle union. Once your sister has been captured, she is taken not to her new home, but to a designated room where she is prepared by a female attendant, a sort of bridesmaid known as an unforgiving. The preparations are bizarre. First, her head is shaved, just as yours was when you entered the Agoge. She is stripped of her female identity, ready to be remade as a wife. Then, she is dressed in men's clothing, a man's cloak and sandals. Finally, she is left alone in a dark room, lying on a simple pallet on the floor, to await the arrival of her husband. This cross-dressing and head shaving is one of the most debated aspects of the Spartan wedding. What did it mean? One theory, proposed by Plutarch, is that it was designed to ease the transition for the husband. Remember, Spartan men had spent their entire lives, from age 7, in an exclusively male environment. Their deepest emotional bonds were with other men. The world of women was alien to them. By making his new bride look as much like a boy as possible, shaved head, men's clothes, in the dark, the ritual may have been intended to make the first marital encounter less intimidating and more familiar for the groom, bridging the gap between the homoerotic world of the barracks and the heterosexual demands of marriage. Another theory is that it symbolized the bride's transition into a new role where she would take on masculine responsibilities, like managing the estate. By shedding her conventionally female appearance, she was showing that she was more than just a woman. She was a competent, powerful partner in the Spartan enterprise. Historians are still arguing over these interpretations, as the Spartans themselves left no written explanation for this strange custom. It remains a fascinating puzzle, a window into a psychological landscape very different from our own. Sometime, in the dead of night, her new husband will arrive, but he can't just walk in. He is still officially living in the barracks with the other unmarried soldiers. He has to sneak out, evading the watchful eyes of his iron and his comrades. He must creep through the streets of Sparta, find the house where his new wife is waiting, and slip into the dark room. He spends a short time with her, consummating the marriage in secret, and then he must leave. He has to sneak back into the barracks before dawn, as if nothing has happened. He cannot be caught. To be discovered would be a source of shame. He is a married man, but he must live the life of a bachelor. This is not a one-time event. This pattern of secret, nocturnal visits will continue for a significant period of time, sometimes for years, until the man is 30 years old and finally permitted to live at home. The stated purpose of this bizarre arrangement was, as always, rooted in Spartan ideology. Firstly, it maintained the primacy of the military unit. The man's loyalty was to remain with his messmates in the barracks, not with his new wife. Family life was a secondary concern. Secondly, the Spartans believed that by making access to his wife difficult and infrequent, it would keep the passion high and prevent the couple from becoming overly familiar and soft. They believed that children conceived from this high energy, almost illicit passion would be more vigorous and stronger. It was another form of bioengineering, an attempt to control the very passion of conception for a better result. Think of the psychological effect of this. Your sister begins her married life in a state of semi-isolation, seeing her husband only in brief, stolen encounters in the dark. Their relationship is built in the shadows. For the husband, his life is split in two. He is a warrior by day, a husband by night, and must keep the two identities separate. Some couples had several children before they ever saw each other's faces in the daylight. This entire ritual, the abduction, the cross-dressing, the clandestine visits, underscores a fundamental truth about Spartan marriage. It was not about companionship or building a shared life in the modern sense. It was a civic duty, a reproductive contract. The state needed heirs, and this was the highly controlled, ritualized process for producing them. The personal feelings of the couple were almost irrelevant. The strange, secretive nature of the wedding set the tone for a marriage that would always be secondary to the needs of the state. You are now a man. You have survived the Agoge, passed the test of Artemis or Thea, and been accepted into a S3X city, the communal dining club that is the heart of Spartan civic and military life. You are a full citizen, a notorious, one of the peers or equals. And now, like the warrior who married your sister, it is your turn to take a wife. You go through the same strange rituals, the staged abduction, the secret ceremony. You find yourself sneaking out of the barracks at night, a shadow moving through the silent streets, your heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and the fear of being caught. Your life is now officially schizophrenic. By day, you are a soldier, living, eating, and breathing the camaraderie of your messmates. Your entire world is the barracks, the training field, the harsh jokes and rigid hierarchy of your military unit. By night, for a few stolen hours, you are a husband. You creep into the darkened room where your wife waits, her head shaved, dressed in the masculine cloak. Your first encounters are furtive, hurried, conducted in whispers and shadows. There is no time for long conversations, for the gentle getting to know each other that other cultures might consider essential. Your union is a physical fact before it is an emotional one. And then, before the first hint of dawn, you must slip away, back to your bunk, to pretend you were there all night. This strange double life continues, not for weeks, but for years. You are a husband and a father, perhaps, but you do not live with your family. You see your wife only as a nocturnal visitor. You might catch a glimpse of her across a public space during the day, a woman who is the mother of your children, but you are not to engage in public displays of affection. Such a thing would be seen as undignified and soft. Your primary identity is soldier, and the roles of husband and father are performed in the margins, in the dark. The logic behind this, as explained by writers like Plutarch, was multifaceted. It was, as mentioned, about keeping the man's focus squarely on his military duties. The brotherhood of the barracks was not to be diluted by domestic concerns, but it was also a form of psychological conditioning. by making the marital relationship a thing of stolen moments. It was meant to prevent men from becoming enslaved to their wives or to the comforts of home life. A Spartan warrior's home was his mess hall. His family was his unit. Everything else was secondary. Here's a peculiar detail that illustrates the extremity of this system. The communal judgment within the S3X Cydia. Your acceptance into one of these dining clubs was a crucial step to full citizenship. The existing members would vote on your admission using breadcrumbs. Each member would take a piece of bread, and if they approved of you, they would drop it into a bowl as is. If they voted against you, they would squeeze it flat first. A single flattened crumb, a single no vote, was enough to deny you entry. If you failed to get into a mess, you would lose your citizenship rights. It was a brutal system of conformity, and once inside, your life was an open book. If your comrades suspected you were spending too much time with your wife, or showing signs of domesticity, you would be ridiculed and shamed. But what about the emotional reality of this? This is where historians debate. Did this system successfully create detached, hardened soldiers? Or did it create a profound sense of alienation? Imagine being a father but not being able to publicly acknowledge your child or live with them. Imagine a marriage built on stealth and separation. It's possible this constant separation had the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of making the bond less intense, the forbidden, clandestine nature of the meetings might have made them even more romantic and emotionally charged for some. The scarcity of time together could have made each stolen moment more precious. The system also had a clear, practical benefit for the women. With the husband living in the barracks until age 30, the wife was the undisputed master of the household. She ran the estate, she controlled the finances, and she raised the children for the first 7 years, at least without any daily interference from her husband. This contributed significantly to the famous independence and authority of Spartan women. They were married, but for the first decade or so of that marriage, they lived like single heads of household. For you, this is just the way life is. You don't question it. You learn the routes through the city that are least likely to be patrolled. You learn to read the night sky to know when you must head back to the barracks. You live for the brief hours of intimacy and connection, a stark contrast to the harsh, all-male world you inhabit during the day. Your marriage is a secret you share with your wife, a small pocket of private life in a society that claims ownership over everything. You are a husband, but you are the bachelor. You are a father, but you live in a dorm. It is a strange, fragmented existence, all designed for a single purpose, to ensure that when the call to war comes, you will march out with your brothers in arms without a single backward glance toward a home you barely inhabit. The entire strange and secretive system of Spartan marriage, the delayed age, the athletic assessments, the clandestine meetings, was all built around one central, overriding principle: eugenics. This wasn't a hidden agenda. It was an open and devout state policy. The Spartans were obsessed with quality control, and that started with the raw materials. They wanted to breed the best possible soldiers, and every aspect of marriage and procreation was engineered to achieve that goal. The most important factor in this policy was age. You and your wife were not permitted to marry as teenagers. The lawgiver Lycurgus, as interpreted by Xenophon and Plutarch, decreed that men should marry in their prime, around age 30, and women in theirs, around age 18 to 20. This was a radical departure from the norm in the ancient world, where girls were often married off as soon as they were physically capable of bearing children. The Spartan logic was twofold. First, they believed that parents who were at the peak of their physical strength and vitality would produce more robust offspring. It was animal husbandry applied to humans. You breed your best stock when they are in their prime, not when they are too young or too old. A child conceived by too strong, mature adults was thought to have a much better chance of passing the infant inspection by the elders. Second, delaying marriage for women, in particular, was seen as crucial for their health and the health of their children. The Spartans observed that very young mothers often had more difficult and dangerous childbirths, and their children were often weaker. By allowing a woman's body to fully mature before her first pregnancy, they increased the odds of a successful birth and a healthy baby in an era before modern medicine. This was a remarkably astute and practical public health policy. Even if its motives were purely militaristic, it's one of the few areas where Spartan policy, despite its harshness, was arguably better for women's physical well-being than the practices of more civilized states like Athens. This focus on the golden age of reproduction also explains the secrecy of the early years of marriage. The state wanted you to be procreating, but it didn't want you to be domesticated. The system of sneaking into your wife's room was the state's clever, if psychologically strange, solution. It allowed for conception to occur during your peak physical years from your late 20s, early 30s without disrupting your military service. But the eugenics program went far beyond just age. It extended to the selection of partners. As we've seen, the public, co-ed nature of physical education was essentially a showroom for genetic fitness. Men and women assessed each other's physical attributes openly. A man with a strong physique was a desirable husband. A woman known for her athletic prowess was a desirable wife. This wasn't about romantic attraction as we know it. It was about identifying a partner who could contribute superior genes to the next generation. Here's a small but telling detail: the shame associated with being unmarried. In a society so focused on procreation for the state, choosing to remain a bachelor was not a neutral personal choice. It was a dereliction of duty. Unmarried men, or men who married too late, were publicly shamed. According to Plutarch, they were subjected to various humiliations during certain religious festivals. For instance, during one winter festival, they were forced to march naked around the marketplace, singing a song of disgrace that admitted their punishment was just because they had disobeyed the laws. Young women would also be present, heaping verbal abuse on them. It was a powerful to love social pressure to ensure that every able-bodied citizen participated in the state's breeding program. However, historians still debate the true effectiveness of this ruthless system. Did it actually work? Did the Spartans really breed a master race of warriors? In the short term, it seems to have been successful. For several centuries, the Spartan army was the most feared and dominant land force in Greece. Their physical toughness and discipline were legendary. But in the long term, this same system contained the seeds of its own destruction. The obsession with quality over quantity, the harsh culling of infants, the late marriages, and the constant warfare lead to a critical and ultimately fatal problem. Anthropia, a shortage of people. The number of full Spartan citizens, the Agoge, began to shrink dramatically over the generations. The criteria for citizenship were so strict: birth from to Spartan parents, completion of the Agoge, admission to S3X Cydia, that more and more people were disqualified. By the time of Aristotle in the 4th century BCE, he noted that Sparta, a state that could have supported a massive army, could barely field 1,000 soldiers. Their eugenics program, designed to create an elite, had become so exclusive that the elite was simply dying out. So, as you live out your life under this system, you are part of a grand, multi-generational experiment You feel the pressure to be strong, to choose a strong partner, to produce strong children. You accept it as the natural order of things. You are proud to be a product of this selective process, but you are unaware that the very system that makes you feel superior is slowly strangling your society. The relentless pursuit of the perfect Spartan is, paradoxically, leading to a future where there are no Spartans left at all. You are now in your 30s. You have finally been released from the obligation of living in the barracks. For the first time since you were 7 years old, you are allowed to live at home, under the same roof as your wife and children. You might think this is the beginning of a conventional family life, but you would be mistaken. The person in charge of your home is not you. It is your wife. You arrive at your house, a place you have only ever visited as a clandestine guest, and find that it is a well-oiled machine, an enterprise that has been running efficiently for years without you. Your wife is not just a mother. She is the CEO of the household. She manages the kale arrows, the plot of agricultural land that is the basis of your citizenship and wealth. She oversees the helots, the state-owned serfs who work that land, directing their labor, managing the harvest, and ensuring the quotas of produce are sent to your communal mess hall. The S3X city. Failure to provide your share to the mess would result in the loss of your citizenship. So her role is not just domestic. It is essential to maintaining your political standing. This gives her a level of economic power that is staggering compared to her Greek counterparts. In Athens, a wife was legally a minor, unable to enter into contracts or own property of any significance. She lived in seclusion in the women's quarters of the house. Your wife, on the other hand, strides through the house and the estate with an air of absolute authority. She is literate. She keeps accounts. She negotiates with traders. She disciplines the household slaves. She is, for all practical purposes, the master of the estate. Your role is different. You are still a full-time soldier. You must eat your main meal every evening at the S3X city with your comrades. Your days are spent in military training or other state duties. You are more of a boarder in your own home than its master. Your wife's domain is the economic and domestic sphere. Yours is the military and political one. It is a partnership, but one with clearly delineated and surprisingly modern seeming spheres of influence. This division of labor leads to the accumulation of vast wealth in the hands of women. Since men were often killed in battle, their land and property would be inherited by their daughters or wives. Over time, this created a powerful class of wealthy female landowners. As mentioned, Aristotle famously complained about this, believing that 2/5 of Sparta's land had fallen under the control of women. He saw this as a source of corruption and luxury that undermined the traditional Spartan values of austerity. He writes, with clear disapproval, of women who were intemperate and luxurious, adorned with gold and fine clothes, a far cry from the athletic girls in simple tunics. And here we find a wonderful, quirky detail that illustrates this female economic power. Spartan women were famous breeders of prize-winning horses. Chariot racing was a prestigious and very expensive sport in ancient Greece. Unlike in the athletic games, the owner of the winning chariot and horses was declared the victor, not the driver. Several Spartan women became famous throughout Greece by owning and entering winning chariot teams in the Olympic Games. A woman named Cyaniska, sister of a Spartan king, was the first woman in history to win at the Olympics. And she was so proud of her victories that she set up statues of herself and her horses at the sanctuary of Olympia. This was an astonishing display of wealth, ambition, and public pride for a woman in the ancient world. But, As always, historians debate the true meaning of this power. Was it a form of early feminism? Or was it simply another aspect of the Spartan system? The argument for the latter is that this economic control was granted to women out of pure necessity. With the men constantly occupied by war, someone had to run the economy. The women were empowered not for their own sake, but to free up the men to be full-time soldiers. Their power was a byproduct of the state's military obsession. Furthermore, this freedom was contingent on fulfilling their primary duty, procreation. A woman's status was inextricably linked to her role as a mother of warriors. If she failed to produce children, her position could become precarious. Her economic power was, in a sense, a payment for her reproductive services to the state. So, you settle into this strange domestic arrangement. You learn to defer to your wife's authority in household matters. You enjoy the fruits of her competent management, which allows you to focus on your duties as a soldier and citizen. You are a partner in a powerful enterprise, but you are the junior partner when it comes to the home. You see firsthand what the rest of Greece only whispered about with a mixture of horror and fascination. The formidable, competent, and surprisingly free women of Sparta. They are the backbone of the society, the silent, efficient engine that keeps the war machine running. And the state's demand for strong soldiers is so great that it will soon lead to even more radical interventions into your marriage. Years pass. You and your wife have built a life together within the rigid confines of Spartan society. You have children, and you have seen them off to their own destinies. Your sons to the Agoge, your daughters to their own athletic and domestic training. Your marriage is stable, a partnership that manages the family estate and contributes to the state. But the state's demands are never fully satisfied. The need for strong new citizens is a constant, gnawing hunger. And this is where your marriage contract is revealed to have a clause you might not have expected. A clause written in the invisible ink of state interest. Let's say you are a good soldier, but not a great one. You are respected, but not a hero. Living in your city is a man who is the stuff of legends. A warrior of exceptional bravery, strength, and cunning. He has distinguished himself in battle time and time again. He is, in the Spartan view, a man of superior genetic stock. His DNA is a state asset, too valuable to be limited to just his own wife and children. One day, an elder of the state, or perhaps even your wife, might approach you with a proposal. It is a proposal that would be unthinkable in any other society. But here, it is considered a matter of civic duty and patriotism. The suggestion is made that your wife should conceive a child with this great hero. This practice, which we might call gene sharing, was one of Sparta's most radical eugenic policies. The historian Xenophon, an admirer of Sparta, describes it with his typical, matter-of-fact approval. He explains that the lawgiver Lycurgus observed that many men, for various reasons, might not wish to marry, or might be married to infertile women. At the same time, they might want to have worthy children. Lycurgus, therefore, created a system where a man could, if he found a woman he admired for her noble character and healthy children, approach her husband and ask for permission to have a child with her. The goal was purely eugenic. It was a way to ensure that the best seed was spread as widely as possible among the best soil. The child born of such a union would be considered the legal heir of the husband, not the biological father. The hero was essentially a sperm donor, lending his superior genetic material for the good of the state and for the honor of the family that would raise his child. The husband, far from being shamed, would be honored to have his lineage improved by such a distinguished man. He gets to raise a child with a superior genetic inheritance, and the state gets another potential top-tier soldier. The reverse was also true. If you were an older man with a young wife, and you recognized your own physical decline, you were encouraged to find a younger, more vigorous man, someone you admired for his virtue and strength, and bring him into your house to father children with your wife. The goal was to prevent the stock from being blunted by an old man's feeble seed. It was an unsentimental, brutally pragmatic approach to procreation. Personal jealousy and possessiveness were expected to be suppressed in the face of this patriotic duty. Here's a small, fascinating detail related to this. The concept of adultery. In Sparta, adultery, as other Greeks understood it, barely existed. Adultery is fundamentally about property rights, a man's exclusive sexual ownership of his wife. Since Spartan society did not view wives as mere property, and since the goal of sex within marriage was primarily procreation for the state, the rules were different. As long as a sexual relationship was aimed at producing strong children for a legitimate household, and was done with the husband's consent, it wasn't considered a transgression. It was a collaboration. The only real crime would be a secret, passionate affair that served no state purpose, or one that introduced inferior or illegitimate children into the citizen body. Of course, historians are still debating how common this practice actually was. Was it a frequent occurrence, a routine part of married life, or was it a rare, exceptional measure, reserved for kings and heroes? The historical accounts, like that of King in Alexandrid as I who was pressured to take a second wife when his first was barren, suggest it was a real and practiced policy, at least at the highest levels, but we have no idea how it played out for the average Spartan. Imagine the psychological complexity, the conversation between you and your wife, the quiet acquiescence to a state demand that intrudes into the most intimate aspect of your life. Can human emotions like jealousy, pride, and love be so easily suppressed by ideology? The Spartans believed so. They believed that a citizen's highest duty was to the collective, and that personal feelings were a self-indulgent weakness. But it's hard not to wonder about the quiet tensions, the unspoken resentments, that might have simmered beneath the surface of these patriotic arrangements. You look at your wife, a woman you have shared a life with, and you both understand the duty that is being asked of you. It is a sacrifice of your pride, your exclusivity, for the greater good. Your marriage is not your own. Your wife's womb is not her own. They are resources of the state, to be allocated in the most efficient way possible to produce the next generation of defenders. The principle of sharing for the good of the state did not end with borrowing a hero's genes. It extended to an even more intimate and, for outsiders, shocking arrangement, the sharing of wives between brothers or close partners. This was not a matter of open, polyamorous relationships, but another highly regulated, pragmatic solution to a very Spartan problem. The problem, as always, was demographics. The state needed a steady supply of healthy male heirs to fill the ranks of the army and the citizen body. But life was precarious. Men died in battle. Some men were infertile. Some family lines were at risk of dying out. To combat this, the Spartans developed a system that treated a wife's reproductive capacity as a resource that could be shared within a family unit to ensure its survival. The most common form of this was a type of polyandry, where a woman could be a wife to two or more brothers. The ancient historian Polybius describes this practice. He notes that it was common for several brothers to share a single wife, and the children born from this union would be considered the children of all the brothers, raised in common. This was a practical solution to several problems at once. First, it consolidated the family estate. The Kale arrows. Instead of dividing the ancestral land amongst several brothers, each needing to support his own wife and family, the land remained intact. One wife, one household, meant the family's economic base was not fragmented. This was crucial for maintaining the wealth and status required for citizenship. It kept the family property strong and unified across generations. Second, it maximized the chances of producing heirs. If one brother was infertile, another could father the children. If one brother was away at war for a long period, another could ensure that his wife was still bearing children for the family line. It was a form of reproductive insurance, a way to guarantee that the family name and property would continue. And third, it fostered a sense of unity and shared purpose among the brothers. Their personal interests were completely subsumed by the collective interest of the family. The children they raised together would strengthen the bonds between them. This mirrored the collective ethos of the broader Spartan society. The family unit became a microcosm of the S3X city, a collective bound by shared resources and a common goal. There's a curious detail in this arrangement that Plutarch mentions: the role of the older, childless man. He writes that Lycurgus encouraged a specific kind of relationship between an older man and a younger, married man. The older man, if he admired the younger man's wife, could essentially co-opt the marriage to produce an heir for himself. He would treat the children as his own, giving them a stake in his wealth and legacy. This wasn't seen as adultery or wife stealing. It was a way for a man without heirs to adopt them, in a sense, before they were even born, ensuring his own lineage and property had a future. It was another strange, collaborative, reproductive strategy designed to strengthen the social fabric. Naturally, historians argue about the emotional and social dynamics of these arrangements. How did a wife navigate a relationship with multiple husbands? Who had precedence? Was it a source of harmony or of constant, simmering conflict? The Spartan sources, predictably, present it as a rational and orderly system. They emphasize the logic and the benefits to the state and the family. They are silent on the potential for human drama, the jealousy, the favoritism, the emotional toll on the woman at the center of the arrangement. It's tempting to view this through a modern lens as a system that treated women as mere broodmothers, passed between men to serve a patriarchal lineage. And there is certainly truth to that. Her body was a vessel for the continuation of the family line. However, it's also possible to see it from another angle. In a society where a woman's primary value was tied to her ability to produce children, a system that provided multiple avenues for her to do so could also have been a source of security. If her husband was infertile, she was not cast aside as barren. The system provided a built-in solution that preserved her status and her role within the family. You might see this in your own community. A neighboring estate is run by a woman who is the wife of two brothers. One is often away on campaign. The other manages the day-to-day affairs alongside her. The children they raise call both men father. To you, it is not a scandal. It is a practical, logical way of life. It is simply how things are done. It is another example of the Spartan willingness to subordinate every personal, individual instinct, monogamy, sexual jealousy, the desire for exclusive possession, to the cold, hard logic of state survival. Your wife is your partner. Yes, but she is also a shared asset of the family, just as the family is an asset of the state. The lines of ownership are blurred, because in Sparta, the only true owner of anything, or anyone, is the polis itself. In a society obsessed with procreation, where your entire worth as a man is linked to your ability to contribute strong sons to the state, what happens if you cannot? For a Spartan man, Infertility was not a private medical issue. It was a public failure, a source of deep personal shame and social stigma. It was a failure to fulfill your most fundamental duty. Imagine the pressure. You have done everything right. You survived the culling at birth. You endured the Agoge. You have become a respected warrior and a full citizen. You have married a strong, healthy woman. That the years go by, and your wife does not conceive. In the quiet of your home, a space you now share, there is a growing, unspoken tension. In public, at the S3X city, you feel the questioning glances of your peers. The laconic jokes might take on a sharper, more personal edge. The state did not formally punish a man for being infertile, but the social consequences were severe. You would be seen as failing in your primary function. Your family line, your killed arrows, your very name was at risk of disappearing. This was not just a personal tragedy. It was a blow to the state, which was already struggling with a declining population of citizens. This is where the pragmatic, unsentimental nature of Spartan society offered a series of stark, and for us, shocking, solutions. The problem was not seen as an insurmountable tragedy, but as a logistical issue to be solved. The goal, producing an heir, was paramount, and the means to achieve it were flexible. The first and most obvious solution was the one we've already discussed: bringing in a third party. As the husband, you would be expected to recognize your deficiency and proactively seek a solution for the good of your household and the state. It would be your duty to select a man, perhaps a younger, more vigorous relative, or a warrior you admired, to father a child with your wife. This was the honorable path. You would swallow your pride, acknowledge the issue, and take the necessary steps. The child would legally be yours. You would raise it as your own, and your family line would continue. Your public duty would be fulfilled. But what if you resisted? What if your pride or your love for your wife made you refuse this option? This is where the power of Spartan women could come into play. A wife in this situation was not helpless. Her duty, too, was to the state. If her husband was unable or unwilling to provide her with children, she had not only the right, but arguably the obligation, to seek a solution herself. According to a story recounted by Plutarch, a Spartan man named Geradatas, when asked by a foreigner what the punishment for adultery was in Sparta, replied that there were no adulterers in his city. The foreigner pressed, "But what if there were?" Geradatas calmly replied that the offender would have to pay a fine of a magnificent bull, one so large it could stand on one side of Mount Tigidus and drink from the Eurotas river on the other. The foreigner, amazed, said, "But how could there ever be such a bull?" Geradatas smiled and said, "Then how could there ever be an adulterer in Sparta?" The story is meant to be a clever boast about Spartan virtue, but historians now read it in a different light. It's not that secret affairs didn't happen. It's that the concept of adultery was so narrow. A woman who, with the tacit or even explicit approval of the community, conceived a child with another man because her husband was infertile, was not seen as an adulteress. She was seen as a patriot. She was doing her duty. The shame would fall not on her, but on the infertile husband who had failed to provide. This leads to a fascinating and still debated question. Could a woman initiate a form of divorce? The evidence is scarce. Divorce seems to have been rare in Sparta, largely because the marriage and procreation systems had so many built-in workarounds. There was no need to dissolve a marriage for infertility when there were socially acceptable ways to bring in another partner. However, given the economic power of Spartan women, especially those who own significant property. It is plausible that a woman in a childless marriage could have leveraged her position to leave her husband, or at least to force the issue of bringing in another man. So you are faced with a stark choice. You can live with the quiet shame of being a dead end for your lineage, a net drain on the state's demographic resources, or you can accept the Spartan solution. You can watch another man enter your home to do what you cannot, and then raise the resulting child as your own. It is the ultimate test of your indoctrination. Can you suppress your most basic human instincts? Pride, jealousy, possessiveness, for the good of the collective. For most, the choice was clear. The desire to have an heir, to see your family name continue, and to fulfill your public duty would outweigh the personal humiliation. You would make the pragmatic choice, and in doing so, you would reaffirm the central creed of your society. The individual is nothing. The state is all. The day arrives. Your wife gives birth, whether the child is biologically yours, or the result of a state-sanctioned arrangement with a brother or a hero. The next step is identical. The cycle begins anew. You now stand in the shoes of your own father, holding a fragile, newborn life in your arms. The relief and joy of a safe birth are immediately overshadowed by a familiar, institutional anxiety. You have done your part. Your wife has done hers. But the child's fate is not yet sealed. It is time for the second, and most crucial, screening. You take your baby, just a few days old, and you make that same solemn walk your father made with you. You leave your home, carrying your child not to a place of celebration, but to the SJ, the public hall where the elders of your tribe sit in judgment. The scene is exactly as it was a generation ago. The same stone columns, the same hard benches, the same row of weathered, unsmiling faces. These are the men who hold the power of life and death. As you stand before them, you unwrap the infant. A hush falls. This moment is the culmination of everything. The delayed marriage, the eugenic selection, the years of physical training for both you and your wife. The entire system has been geared towards producing a perfect specimen, the child without flaw. Now, that product is being submitted for its final quality inspection. You watch as the elders perform their dispassionate, clinical examination. Their gnarled fingers trace the line of the baby's spine. They check the limbs for straightness, the head for its shape. They listen to the cry, assessing its vigor. Your heart is in your throat. This is not just about the life of your child. It is a verdict on you. It is a judgment on your fitness, your wife's fitness, your family's genetic worth. Your entire honor as a Spartan citizen feels concentrated in this single, terrifying moment of scrutiny. This is where the Spartan system reveals its most relentless and cyclical nature. You are not just a father. You are an agent of the state, submitting a potential asset for approval. Your personal love for this tiny being in your arms is irrelevant to the proceedings. The only question that matters is this child a worthy investment for Sparta? Let's consider a little-known aspect of Spartan parenting that comes after this moment. Should the child be approved? You might think that, having passed this terrible test, the child would be cherished. But Spartan parenting, as we've seen, was anything but gentle. There was a particular belief about how to handle infants. Recorded by Plutarch, he noted that Spartan parents would not use swaddling bands to wrap their infants tightly, as was common elsewhere. They believed that constricting a baby's limbs made them weak and misshapen. Instead, babies were given freedom of movement to encourage their limbs to grow strong and straight. Furthermore, they were deliberately schooled in indifference. Children ought not to be afraid of the dark by being left alone. They were taught not to be picky eaters by being fed plain, simple food. They were taught not to cry or throw tantrums by being ignored when they did. The goal was to raise children who were stoic, independent, and brave from the cradle. You, as a father, are expected to enforce this. To coddle your child would be to fail them, to make them soft and unfit for the life that awaits them. Historians often debate the long-term psychological effects of this parenting style. Did it create emotionally resilient super soldiers? Or did it create adults with profound attachment disorders, incapable of forming deep, empathetic bonds? The Spartan ideal was the former. Of course, they believed they were forging strength. But from a modern psychological perspective, it's hard not to see it as a recipe for emotional trauma. This emotional distance, enforced from birth, was a necessary prerequisite for a system that would demand you hand your son over to the brutal Agoge at age 7 without protest. You were not raising a son to love. You were raising a soldier to lose. Back in the Hall of the Elders, the examination concludes. There is a moment of unbearable silence. Then, a slow, collective nod. The verdict is in. Your child has passed. They are deemed worthy. A wave of relief, so profound it is almost painful, washes over you. You carefully rewrap your baby. You give the elders a curt, respectful nod, just as your father did. You turn and walk away. Your child's future secured. They have been granted the right to a Spartan life. As you carry your approved child home, you look at their face. You see a future hoplite, or a future mother of hoplites. You see a link in a chain that stretches back through generations of warriors. You have fulfilled your duty. You have successfully replicated the system. You have fed the machine. And in just 7 short years, you will have to give your son back to that machine, just as you were given. The cycle is complete, and it is ready to begin again. You have reached the pinnacle of a Spartan man's life. You are in your 40s or 50s. You are a veteran warrior, a respected father, and devoting member of the assembly. You have navigated the treacherous shoals of the Agoge, the strange currents of Spartan marriage, and the immense pressure of procreation. You are, by all accounts, a success story of the like-Ergen system. But what does your daily life actually look like? Is there ever a moment of peace, of retirement? The short answer is no. A Spartan man is a soldier for life. Your service does not end at 30, when you are allowed to live at home. It does not end at 40, when you are a seasoned veteran. You remain on the active duty roster, liable to be called up for a campaign, until you are 60 years old. Your life is one of perpetual military readiness. Your days are still structured around the state. You continue to take your main meal at the S3X city, the military mess hall. This is not optional. It is the core of your civic life. Here, you are not just eating. You are participating in the constant reinforcement of Spartan values. You are surrounded by the same men you have trained with your entire life. You share stories of old campaigns. You debate politics. You judge the younger generation of warriors. And you contribute to the group cohesion that is the bedrock of the phalanx. Your family life, even now that you live at home, is secondary to this military fraternity. Your wife continues to manage the estate with formidable competence. You might spend your days overseeing the training of the youths in the Agoge, passing on your knowledge to the next generation. You might serve as an official of the state, or participate in the Apella, the citizen assembly where you vote on matters of war and peace by shouting. There is no concept of a private life as we would understand it. Your time is not your own. This lifelong military service had a profound effect on the Spartan psyche. You are conditioned to see the world through a military lens. Problems have tactical solutions. People are assessed based on their strength, utility, and loyalty. There is little room for ambiguity or sentimentality. This is what made Spartans seem so strange and laconic to other Greeks. They were men who had been systematically stripped of the softer, more complex aspects of human personality. Here's a peculiar detail of this later stage of life. Your relationship with the youths in the Agoge. As a veteran warrior, you now take on the role of the mentor, the Aristas that you once looked up to. You watch the boys train, scouting for that same spark of arete that your own mentor saw in you. You might take a promising boy under your wing, guiding him, testing him, and forming that same intense, state-sanctioned bond. You are now responsible for transmitting the Spartan code to the next generation. This cycle of mentorship is a key part of the social glue that holds your society together. It ensures that the values and traditions are passed down not just through formal instruction, but through personal, charismatic relationships. But historians are still debating the true quality of life for an aging Spartan. On the one hand, you held a position of immense honor and respect. Age was venerated in Sparta, unlike in many other Greek states where youth was prized above all. The Geros Ia, the council of elders that held so much power and judged your baby, was composed of men over the age of 60. To reach that age as a warrior was a sign of both luck and skill, and it granted you a powerful voice in the state. On the other hand, it was a life of relentless, grinding duty. There was no golden age of retirement, no time to pursue personal hobbies or interests. Your entire existence, from the cradle to the grave, was dedicated to the service of the state. The constant warfare took a heavy toll. You would have seen countless friends and comrades fall in battle. You would have lived with the constant threat of a helot uprising. It was a life of high stress, high stakes, and profound psychological rigidity. As you look at your sons and the Agoge, you see a reflection of your own past. You see the shaved heads, the single-course tunic, the hungry, determined eyes. You feel a surge of pride. They are being forged in the same fire that forged you. They are learning the same lessons of pain, discipline, and honor. You have no doubt that this is the best, the only way to create man. You believe in the system because you are its product. You cannot see its flaws, its brilliances, its self-destructive logic. You see only its strength. A strength reflected in the disciplined ranks of the phalanx, in the formidable confidence of your wife, in the stoic endurance of your sons. Your family is not a private source of comfort. It is your personal contribution to the fortress that is Sparta, and you will defend it, and be defined by it, until your very last breath. As you go about your life, training, eating in the mess hall, overseeing your estate, you are walking on a foundation of silence. It is the silence of a vast, subjugated population whose labor makes your entire existence possible. They are the helots, and they are the unseen, unspoken truth at the heart of the Spartan sexual and social system. Without them, none of it could work. The helots were not slaves in the conventional sense, like those in Athens who were bought and sold as individuals. They were a collective, state-owned population, tied to the land they worked. They were the descendants of the original Macedonian and Laconian peoples that the Spartans had conquered centuries ago. They were assigned to the Kale Aroi, the plots of land owned by Spartan citizens, and their job was to farm it. They were forced to give a huge portion of their produce, typically half, to their Spartan masters. This surplus is what fed you. What allowed you to dedicate your entire life to warfare instead of farming? Your freedom to train was purchased with their servitude. You interact with them every day, but you do not see them as people. You have been taught from birth that they are inferior, untrustworthy, and a constant, simmering threat. They outnumber the Spartan citizens by a huge margin, perhaps as much as 10 to 1 at certain points in history. This demographic imbalance created a permanent state of paranoia in Spartan society. Your entire military culture, your constant training, was not just for fighting foreign enemies. It was for maintaining internal control. It was for terrorizing the helots into submission. This relationship had a dark and bizarre annual ritual. Every autumn, the Pehors, the 5 elected magistrates of Sparta, would formally declare war on the helot population. This was not a joke. It was a legal mechanism that allowed any Spartan citizen to kill a helot without incurring blood guilt or facing any religious or legal penalty. It was open season. This declaration of war enabled one of the most sinister institutions of the Spartan state, the Cryptia. The name means the secret thing or the secret service. It was a select group of the most promising and cunning young men from the Agoge. As a final test of their skills, they would be sent out into the countryside with nothing but a knife. They were to live off the land, hide by day, and at night, they were to hunt and murder any helots they found. The targets were usually the strongest, most intelligent, and most charismatic helots, anyone who might have the potential to lead a revolt. It was a targeted assassination program designed to keep the helot population terrified and leaderless. This is the grim reality that underpins the freedom of Spartan women as well. Your wife's ability to manage the estate, to own property, to participate in athletics, was all predicated on the fact that she had a captive labor force to do all the actual work. The image of the strong Spartan woman exercising in the gymnasium stands in stark contrast to the image of the helot woman toiling in the fields, her body broken by labor, not strengthened by sport. The relationship between Spartans and helots also had a sexual dimension, though it is one the sources are very quiet about. While your marriage laws were obsessed with producing legitimate Spartan heirs, it is almost certain that Spartan men sexually exploited helot women. A child born from such a union would not be a Spartan citizen. They would be a not HOS, a bastard, occupying a precarious middle ground in the social hierarchy. Some of these Nathoi could, through exceptional military service, rise in status, but they would never be true homoioi. This sexual exploitation was another to love domination, a way of reinforcing the power dynamic between master and slave. Historians are still debating the full extent of the helot's influence on Spartan culture. Some argue that the constant fear of a helot uprising is the single most important factor in explaining everything about Sparta. Why the brutal Agoge? To create soldiers capable of suppressing a revolt. Why the lifelong military service? To maintain a constant state of readiness. Why the extreme communalism and rejection of luxury? To ensure no citizen became soft and unable to fight. In this view, Spartan society was not so much a proud warrior culture as it was a massive, permanent prison camp, and the Spartans were the wardens, trapped in their role as oppressors. You see a group of helots in the distance, bringing in the harvest from your fields. Their backs are bent. Their faces are sullen. You see them as a necessary tool, a dangerous animal that must be kept caged. You do not see their humanity, their families, their own culture and traditions that they struggle to keep alive under your iron fist. You do not recognize that their subjugation is the hidden engine of your wife's freedom, your son's education, and your own life as a warrior. They are the silent partners in every Spartan marriage, the invisible guests at every meal in the S3X city. They are the foundation upon which your entire world is built. And one day, the cracks in that foundation will bring the whole edifice crashing down. You are standing on the training fields, watching the next generation of boys. They are lean, tough, and disciplined. They look just as you did, just as your father did. From the outside, the Spartan system appears to be an engine of perfect replication, churning out identical warriors, generation after generation. It looks like a system built to last forever, but you are beginning to see the cracks. The engine is sputtering. The most obvious problem is the one you see every day. There are fewer and fewer boys on the field. The OLIG entropy, the shortage of people. That began as a slow leak has now become a torrent. You look around at your S3X city and see empty spaces at the table. Places where men once sat who died in battle and were never replaced. The state that once boasted it could field an army of many thousands can now barely muster a single regiment of true-born citizens. Why did this happen? The very systems that were designed to make Sparta strong were, in the long run, its undoing. The ruthless eugenics at birth, culling any infant with the slightest perceived flaw, was the first cut. The high stakes, high casualty nature of Spartan warfare was a constant drain, but the deepest problem was the social and economic rigidity. Citizenship was tied to owning a share of land, the kale arrows, and contributing to a mess hall. Over the generations, through bad luck, bad investments, or the gradual accumulation of land in the hands of a few wealthy families often managed by those famously powerful women. More and more families lost their ancestral land. If you lost your kale arrows, you could no longer make your contribution to the S3X city. And if you couldn't do that, you and your sons lost your status as full citizens. You became one of the hypome ones, the inferiors. You were still Spartan, but you were disenfranchised, stripped of your honor and your political rights. The class of equals was shrinking, while the class of resentful, demoted Spartans was growing. This created a deep, internal sickness in the state. The brotherhood of the Homo Iowa was breaking down, replaced by a growing gap between the super-wealthy elite and the disenfranchised poor. The state that prided itself on equality was becoming a rigid oligarchy, and this demographic crisis had a direct and bizarre impact on the sexual and marital customs of Sparta. The state became even more desperate for legitimate heirs. This desperation may have led to an increase in the more unusual practices, like wife sharing among brothers or borrowing a hero's genes, all in a frantic attempt to keep family lines from dying out. Here we encounter one of the saddest figures in late Spartan society, the trembler, or Trezes. A Trezes was a man who had shown cowardice in battle. His punishment was not death, but a form of social death. He was stripped of all honor. He had to wear special, patched clothing. He had to shave only half his mustache as a mark of ridicule. No one would share a fire with him. No one would speak to him. And in the gymnasium, no one would wrestle with him. And most relevant to our story, no one would give their daughter to him in marriage. He was a genetic and social dead end. As the number of citizens shrank, the pressure to avoid this fate became even more intense. But the existence of this class further shrank the pool of eligible men. Historians are still debating the exact timeline of this decline. When did the system pass the point of no return? Some point to the devastating earthquake of 460 for BCE, which killed thousands and may have emboldened a massive Helot revolt. This double blow crippled Spartan manpower for a generation. Others point to the end of the Peloponnesian War, Sparta won the war against Athens, but the victory brought a flood of foreign wealth and influence into the city, which corrupted the ancient code of austerity and exacerbated the gap between rich and poor. You see the signs of this corruption. You see men from wealthy families using their influence to secure easier posts for their sons. You see luxury goods, once unthinkable, starting to appear in the homes of the elite. The old discipline feels like it's fraying at the edges. The consensus that held your society together is weakening. The system was a brilliant, if brutal, solution to a specific set of problems in a specific time. It was designed to create a perfectly disciplined, homogeneous, and self-sacrificing military elite. But it was too rigid. It could not adapt to changing circumstances. It was like a finely tuned racing engine that required perfect conditions to run. Once the conditions changed, once the population shrank, wealth became concentrated, and the external threats evolved, the engine began to break down. You look at the setting sun casting long shadows over Mount Agoge, the mountain that once seemed like a symbol of Spartan strength now feels like a tombstone. The practices of your ancestors, the very things that made you proud to be a Spartan, the Agoge, the eugenics, the subordination of self to the state, now seem like the chains that are dragging your society into the abyss. The seeds of destruction were not planted by your enemies. They were planted by you, in your own homes, in your own marriage beds, in your own laws. They were the seeds of your own success. The end does not come in a single, glorious, final battle. It is a slow, grinding decline, a fading ember. You are old now. You have made it to the age of 60 and have earned your place in the Jerusalem, the Council of Elders. Or perhaps you are simply a veteran, watching from the sidelines as the world you knew unravels. The Sparta of your youth, the fearsome, disciplined state that dominated Greece, is a ghost. The final, decisive blow came in 371 BCE, at the Battle of Leuctra. It was there that the band General Epaminondas, using a revolutionary new tactic, the slanted phalanx, concentrating his force on one wing, did the unthinkable. He shattered the Spartan army. The king was killed. Hundreds of the precious few homo ioi were slain in a single afternoon. The myth of Spartan invincibility, a myth that had been the cornerstone of your power for centuries, was broken forever. The defeat at Leuctra was not just a military catastrophe. It was a psychological one. It triggered the collapse of the entire system. In the aftermath, Epaminondas marched his army into the heart of Laconia, something no enemy had done in living memory. And he did the one thing that the Spartans had feared for centuries. He liberated Messenia. He freed the Helots. With a single political act, the economic engine of your society was destroyed. The Helots, who had toiled for generations on your Kale Eroi, were now free citizens of their own new state. The land was still there, but there was no one to work it. The foundation of your entire social structure, the agricultural surplus that allowed you to be full-time soldiers, was gone. Spartan citizens, who had never touched a plow in their lives, were suddenly faced with the prospect of having to work for a living. The system collapsed almost overnight. You walk through the streets of Sparta, and it is a city of shadows. The gymnasiums are quieter. The Agoge continues, but it is a hollow imitation of its former self, a ritual without its original purpose. The unique sexual and marital customs, all of which were designed to feed the now-defunct military machine, lose their meaning. Why practice ruthless eugenics when there is no state army to fill? Why enforce clandestine marriages when the barracks are no longer the center of a man's life? Why share wives to consolidate property that is now worthless? The entire elaborate, bizarre, and brutal architecture of Spartan social life becomes a relic. You see your grandchildren, and their lives are completely different from yours. They will not be judged by the elders at birth. Your grandson will not be torn from his home at age 7. Your granddaughter will not be trained as an athlete to breed warriors. They will grow up in a world where Spartan is a memory, a reputation, not a lived reality. The freedom of Spartan women, once so shocking and unique, evaporates. It was always contingent on the military system and the Helletic army. With the men no longer absent at war and the estates no longer functional, the women's sphere of power shrinks. Sparta slowly becomes more like other Greek cities, its women more confined to the domestic sphere. The thigh showers put on longer dresses. Historians still argue about the legacy of Sparta. What did this grand, brutal experiment ultimately achieve? Was it a noble, if failed, attempt at a perfect society based on discipline and equality? Or was it the tyrannical, oppressive state, built on slavery and child abuse, that ultimately deserved its fate? The truth, as always, is uncomfortably in the middle. Sparta was a paradox. It was a state that practiced a form of equality for its male citizens that was radical for its time. Yet it was built on the complete subjugation of another people. It produced women who were freer than any in the ancient world. Yet their freedom was for the sole purpose of breeding soldiers. It created the most disciplined and courageous soldiers known to history. Yet that courage was nurtured through a system of institutionalized cruelty. You sit in the sun, an old man looking back. You remember the sting of the whip at the altar of Artemis. You remember the thrill of a successful night raid for food. You remember the intense, consuming love for your Aristes. You remember the strange, silent nights of your early marriage, sneaking into your own home. You remember the pride and terror of presenting your own son to the elders. These memories are a tapestry of a life that no one else in the world could possibly understand. It was a life of extreme deprivation and extreme honor, of profound brotherhood and profound cruelty. Was it worth it? You don't know how to answer that. It was simply your life. You were a gear in a machine, and you performed your function perfectly. The machine was magnificent, and the machine broke. The sun sets over the mountains, and the long Spartan night begins. Now, the world around you begins to soften. The sharp edges of the training fields and the cold stone of the barracks seem to dissolve, melting into the gentle fabric of a dream. The sounds of clashing spears and harsh commands fade away, replaced by a soft, rhythmic hum, like the distant memory of a river. You can feel the weight of the heavy bronze shield lifting from your arm, the tension in your shoulders finally releasing after a lifetime of holding the line. The figures from your past are still there, but they are quieter now. Your mother's face, once a mask of stern duty, now holds a gentle warmth you never saw in your waking hours. Your mentor, your Aristes, places a hand on your shoulder, not with the firm grip of a commander, but with the light touch of a farewell. Your wife stands beside you, not as an estate manager or a co-producer of heirs, but simply as a partner, her hand finding yours in the quiet twilight of your thoughts. You are drifting now, floating away from the rocky soil of Laconia, away from the jagged peaks of Tegedos, the strict rules, the constant judgment, the lifelong burden of being a Spartan. All of it is becoming lighter, less important. You are no longer a soldier, no longer a citizen with duties to perform. You are just a traveler, moving through the softened, welcoming landscapes of your own mind as you ease into a deepened, peaceful rest. The story is over. The struggle is done. All that is left is the quiet, gentle pull of sleep. The end of the article. Good night.